old. For 20 years, Craig George has pursued one of nature's most intriguing mysteries, and somewhere out there, locked in ice, is the answer. The hunt began in 1981, when Inupiat whalers gave the biologist an ancient stone harpoon tip, pulled from the blubber of a freshly hunted whale. The relic predated European first contact, a fact too impossible to believe and too compelling to ignore. The discovery inspired Craig George to look deeper. Deep inside the eye of the bowhead whale, the astonishing immortal of the Arctic Sea. The Arctic is a barren world of stark beauty and unquestionable power. Even in summer, the frigid seas off the Alaska North Slope are never welcoming and always unpredictable. Barrow is as far north as you can go in the United States, and although modern in appearance, life here is still precarious, just as it's been for the past 4,000 years. To survive in one of the world's harshest environments, Inupiat reality was founded on a single, simple rule. To live, you hunt. They call it the Great Necessity. Since time began, the western bowhead whale population has made one of nature's epic migrations. An annual round trip of over 5,000 miles from its winter calving grounds in the North Pacific to rich summer feeding in the Beaufort Sea. It is no coincidence that the Inupiat of the remote North Slope are a whaling culture. Their survival depends on the gift of the whale. Like clockwork, whaling crews set up their camps on the slowly shrinking ice in anticipation of the bowhead's annual return. They hunt in family groups, and these men of the ABC crew are all brothers. There was a time when tens of thousands of bowheads migrated here, but 19th century commercial whaling reduced that number to less than 10,000. Now the Inupiat work closely with the North Slope Bureau of Wildlife Management. It's a unique relationship that's given wildlife biologist Craig George the chance of a lifetime.
Aging bowheads has eluded the scientific community for a long time. They don't have teeth, so you can't section a tooth and get an age like you could on a sperm whale or a beluga. But there's a lot of evidence that these animals are right up there as some of the longest living mammals, and maybe the longest.
George has worked with the Inupiat for 25 years. Every fourth year, he assembles a team of scientists to monitor the bowhead migration and estimate the population.
That's the first one of the season.
Is it? No, somebody set it off before.
Well, my first set it off right now.
Unlike the hunters, their census camp is far back from the open ocean, but it's still a dangerous place to work. The ice is volatile and could break up at any time, sending the camp on a one-way trip to Siberia.
Just a few days ago, I called out and said that some of the camps to the south had broken off, and they said, well, everything's fine here. And then they looked back and they said, well, wait a minute, the pressure ridges are moving behind us. They sent someone back on the trail, and there was already quarter-mile lead. It happened real quick.
On the sea ice, danger lurks everywhere. Dogs, and a maze of tripwires are the front line of defense to fend off unwelcome visitors.
We see polar bears all the time here. Depending on where we end up camping, sometimes we are one of the first camps to the north, and the bears, when the pack ice comes in, it's kind of like a conveyor belt for bears.
Out at the flow edge, the Inupiat are also used to seeing their fair share of bears. They too have sensed that the hunt is about to begin and hope to share in the harvest.
In our culture, whaling has been the center of our activity over the centuries, and that has not changed. We need food from the Arctic to survive in the Arctic. The animals we hunt have the type of nutritional requirements for Inuit to live in the Arctic. Beef, sheep, and pigs don't cut it. They don't have blubber, they have fat. And that stuff just bloats you. Whereas this stuff is real nutritional and keeps our bodies healthy.
By law, the Inupiat can only hunt bowhead in the traditional way, in flimsy boats made of bone and caribou skin, powered only by brute strength and fierce determination. Craig George is also an experienced hunter, but for now he can only watch and wait. A single bowhead will feed 20 families for an entire year. All George seeks is a single eyeball. With 24 hours of daylight to guide them, the whalers will paddle for miles, hugging the flow edge and scanning the empty ocean. Soon enough, the great whales will come. Miles east of Barrow, the Inuit community of Igloolik Nunavut basks in the light of a perfect Arctic summer. But for the Inuit themselves, life is anything but perfect. Unlike their Inupiat cousins, they haven't hunted the bowhead whale in almost a century. Decimated by commercial whaling, the eastern Arctic bowhead was listed as an endangered species in 1930. Today, its recovery remains uncertain. Eager to revive a lost tradition, the Inuit have also turned to science for help. Larry Dueck of Canada's Department of Fisheries and Oceans studies the eastern bowhead to estimate the size of the existing stock.
There's definite interest by people in the communities to resume hunting of bowhead whales. Each community has an attachment to maintaining cultural ties to the animals that they see in their environment.
And it slides on and cools off. And
in the western Arctic, the bowhead whale has been studied extensively. But here in the east, almost nothing is known, even the annual migration route.
It's a loose thing that you put on and then you screw it on, because it sits and will be squeezed in between the male and this piece.
To find out, satellite tags inserted by harpoon will be used to monitor migration patterns over a 3-month period.
I don't know what you call it. Like this, so I know that it will...
Danish engineer Mikkel Villum Jensen, the tag's designer, has already used them in Greenland with great success.
And it has a little flange as well.
In Igloolik, It's the scientists who will do the hunting.
Well, when I was a child, I'd say about the age of 6, my grandfather used to tell me a lot of bedtime stories. And his close friend happened to be a person who used to enjoy bowhead hunting. He himself caught about 5 bowheads in his lifetime. And he used to go out with him when they're hunting bowheads. As a child, and knowing that it's illegal and we will no longer be able to hunt bowheads, I know that for a fact that I would never ever be in that same position as they were. I would never ever experience it.
You've got to ask yourself one question, Mikkel. Do you feel lucky today?
I feel lucky.
For 4,000 years, the Inuit have lived on this land, but lived from the sea. In winter, when the world was frozen in time, they would dance around the ceremonial stones and celebrate the gift of the whale. The eastern Arctic bowhead population is located in the Fox Basin. Its fertile seas were a major attraction for European whalers until they wiped out the stock. Every summer, the survivors still migrate here to their calving grounds near Qulaut. The current best guess is that there's only 350 remaining. In the western Arctic, the bowhead is recovering, even though it's the slowest of the whales to mature. In the east, no one knows, but both Duek and the Inuit are keen to find out if it too is recovering.
A really interesting question that we're hoping to answer is whether any of the animals in northern Fox Basin move through Fury and Hecla Strait and end up on the other side in the Gulf of Boothia and Pelly Bay, where people from the community of Pelly Bay see bowheads.
I've got you under my skin.
Still see him?
Yeah, he's right there. He's coming up. He's turning. Jesus. Watch out.
But he's too small for the tag. Okay, maybe we should stop chasing him. We'll let him go.
It was right on our side, and then there was another boat on the other side of him, and he decided to turn, so it turned right underneath the boat, came up, and I was looking right in his eye, and he just gave us a little pat with his fluke. That's okay.
Well, just one little skin sample.
precarious perch overlooking the still frozen Beaufort Sea, Craig George waits for the whales to arrive.
They were saying that it was really busy. They had a lot of whales. They had like 15 whales in an hour.
When you're done with that ice shot,
Yeah.
you want to just keep an eye on this pond of water down here as well.
If the ice holds, for the next 3 months, 24 hours a day, they'll count whales.
40?
90, 17.
Well, sometimes you see the blows, you can see the vapor in the air, and then you can zero in on that. It depends on the light conditions too. You know, if the sun's behind it, they're really easy to see. And a lot of times you hear them, so you can zero in on the sound. And sometimes that's hard if the wind is bad, or you know, you've got your parka hood on, you don't always hear them, but you zero in on the sound and then try and find them in the ice. There it is right there, right there!
91, 21,
That's a big whale. 314, 41.
314, 41.
And there's like, it's either a ring seal or a beluga imitating the dew line signal.
Although the visual census is the most accurate, the scientists also look for them underwater. An array of hydrophones spaced a half a mile apart are set under the pack ice to eavesdrop on the whales' conversation.
What we're able to do is continue to look, if you will, at what's happening out there, and especially with the computer display, we're able to actually see the sound, and we're able to continue to count when there's complete ice cover.
The Inupiat have tracked the bowhead acoustically for centuries, using technology that doesn't need batteries.
Oh, that sounds pretty cool. You could actually hear him right there. Got a real high-pitched voice out there.
Whale acoustics are usually associated with humpbacks, but it's the bowhead who is the true maestro of the sea. Living in the ice-cluttered world of the Arctic has honed bowhead communication and navigation skills, allowing them to identify large ice floes miles away. At their peak, 400 calls an hour have been recorded, yet no two signals ever overlapped, which means they can also listen very carefully.
How they navigate through here is a bit perplexing, but certainly using both auditory and visual cues somehow. They may use their calls not in a true echolocation sense, but to get reverberations off the deep keels of this heavy multi-year ice. And there's good evidence that they can do that. And we've seen when we're tracking them where they'll divert from a heavy multi-year flow possibly as much as a kilometer ahead of it.
The evolutionary pressures of a hostile environment have led to a species that is perfectly ice adapted. Small pectorals reduce the danger of ice entanglement, leaving only the powerful tail flukes to propel its massive body. To compensate for their size, bones are hollow, like styrofoam, reducing weight and increasing buoyancy. Only the blue whale is larger than the bowhead, but not as fat. The bowhead's blubber is 20 inches thick, insulating its vital organs from the extreme cold. But to grow so large takes time.
Well, we know they're born at about 4.5 meters, around 13, 14 feet. Then they slowly approach the length at sexual maturity, and that might take 20 years or so when they hit about 13 to 14 meters. And then after that, they're growing even slower, and they probably hit physical maturity at maybe 40 or 50. consider how late they're maturing, they almost have to live quite a while in order to replace themselves.
For 12 hours, the Inupiat whalers have waited silently at the floe edge. Finally, their patience has paid off. They approach cautiously. The bowhead is known as a slow, ponderous, deliberate swimmer, but it does have extraordinary hearing. They must choose their moment, and then the hunt is on. As the legend tells it, when a whale is struck, its enormous power is transferred to the hunter. The moment, properly taken, is a time to reflect on the true gift of the whale.
Oh, there, right, yeah.
In Qulaut, the bowhead hunt has also intensified. Mikkel Jensen stands by with the harpoon as Larry Dueck eases the Zodiac closer.
Coming up! You want it? Yeah. Yo! It's in! Keep following him.
For the transmitter to send a clear signal to the satellite, it must remain out of the water for 1 second, and this one appears too low.
I hesitated there.
I didn't get it all the way. There it's coming again. No, it's not too low. Oh, maybe it's turning. Yeah, I got a beep again.
With the tag working, over the next 80 days, they'll learn more about the bowhead's habits than they have in years. Several miles south of Dueck's location, his Inuit guides are in hot pursuit of another bowhead. Armed with a crossbow loaded with biopsy arrows, they're attempting to collect genetic skin samples. Their results will help determine migration patterns and the future of the stock. If this whale is sampled again in another location, they can map its movement. And by mapping the family lines of each whale sampled, they'll have a better profile of the strength of the population. But the future is not good. Due to the bowhead's extremely low birth rate of only 1 calf every 4 years, extinction of the already endangered fox basin stock is a real possibility.
All my life I had been in a position where I'm being in the middle of a tug of war. 2 different cultures pulling one another. The way I see it is, let's say my grandfather's knowledge is like oil. And the southern knowledge through science is water. Trying to mix these together, it's very, very hard to mix them together. And so we're trying to mix them all the time. And sometimes we are successful, sometimes we are not successful.
The Inuit have observed a change in the whale's behavior, moving off the basin towards the broken ice of the flow edge to feed.
It could be done from here.
Although they'd prefer to tag in open water, Quiviq and Jensen decide to follow their guide's advice.
The bowhead whale is highly ice adapted. When we see them here during the spring, we see them moving along the flow edge, and we see the bowheads actually moving right into the ice-covered areas.
With its acute navigational sensitivity and massive lung capacity, the bowhead can dive for over an hour to feed beneath the ice. At 80 tons and up to 60 feet long at maturity, it requires a massive amount of food to survive. Down here, it does it with ease, feeding on a sea rich with zooplankton and minute copepods, the food web's basic link, and the bowhead's preferred meal. Is the only baleen whale in the Arctic. Its giant curved jaw, lined with fine fringed filters, gives the bowhead its name and takes up as much as 1/3 of its length. Its gaping mouth and 12-foot-long baleen allow it to gorge on copepods alone and undisturbed at the top of the food chain. The bowhead is the Arctic's ultimate survivalist. Trapped under ice 2 feet thick and running out of air, it will use its size and weight to break through and create a breathing hole. Feeding in broken ice have forced the scientists to once again change their strategy. Quiviq attempts to tag a whale on foot, a dangerous game on suspect ice. Finally, he targets a whale resting at the flow edge and slowly begins to stalk his quarry. It's the second successful tagging in less than a day, and although the scientists have done the hunting, it's been good practice for their Inuit guides. Whether they'll get a real chance to hunt the bowhead, for now, remains another mystery of the Arctic Sea. Sun, the Inupiat of Barrow have had a successful hunt. Now, 4 powerboats can tow the bowhead's carcass home through brackish ice. News of the hunter's success has traveled fast, and rumor has it this whale is a big one. Tomorrow, the the whaling captain will host a feast for the entire community, while today is a time to tell tales of the whale.
My crew members here were here all the last 2 days waiting 24 hours a day for the right time for a whale to come up. And my younger nephew heard the blow, and there was a whale come right along the edge of the ice.
Okay, hold on to the line! Hold on to it! We need men over there! Come on! More men!
No heavy equipment is allowed on the unstable ice, only block, tackle, and sheer manpower. Hauling this giant onto the ice will take over 12 hours. A mature whale, it weighs close to 50 tons and will help feed Barrow through the long, dark winter ahead. This whale belongs to the 9 members of the Hobson 1 crew who will get first choice of the butchered meat.
Mark it, it's marked.
A freshly hunted bowhead is a rare chance for hands-on research, and scientists working with Craig George have also rushed down to the sea ice.
Okay, this way?
They race the cutters to measure the carcass and gather as much information as possible before the whale is butchered.
Shark minnow!
Big whale.
Before the hunt began, the researchers gave the whaling captains a list of organs they wanted to examine. Of major interest is the amount of contaminants found in the whale and how they affect its metabolism.
Well, when it comes to the bowhead whale, it's one of the least contaminated marine mammals up here. Animals like the beluga whale and the polar bear feed higher on the food chain and tend to have more of what we call the persistent organic pollutants and mercury. So since they're higher on the food chain, they tend to accumulate more contaminants. These guys feed on small invertebrates, and so they don't accumulate as much.
O'Hara has studied over 50 freshly hunted whales, and so far, he claims to never have seen one that appeared old.
We know that we see evidence of ship strikes, killer whale bites, things like that, so we know that's probably killing some animals. They're getting entangled in gear. So we have evidence of that, and there's probably some animals dying of that. We have yet to get a geriatric animal that we could call old.
And so the question remains, how old can these whales grow? Craig George first asked the question after discovering Stone Age harpoon tips in the carcasses of freshly hunted whales. 20 years of scientific research later, he may have found the answer.
Well, this is a stone point that Benamowik Sr. found in a whale that he took in Wainwright, 93. And it was really this point that encouraged us to, or gave us the motivation to go back and re-examine bowhead age estimates and longevity from some work that was done earlier. So this is such a remarkable find, and from a living whale, it really spurred our interest.
That's this part right there.
Whoa.
About the size of a billiard ball, the bowhead's eye is spherical, allowing it to focus in both air and water.
About the size of a billiard ball.
Inside it lies the whale's secret.
Enough that they can. First thing we do is, when we take the eye out, is we freeze it as quickly as we can, and that stops this chemical change process in the lens. That's the clock in this aging technique. Then we set them down to the Scripps lab for dissection.
San Diego, California is a long way from Barrow. Dr. Jeffrey Bada has never been to the Arctic and never met Craig George. A respected leading-edge chemist, Bada began working on aging bowheads in the late 1970s. His results were so astonishing that no one would believe them, and both he and his research were considered suspect.
Things just sort of came to a screeching halt. There was some level of opposition against believing that these whales could live beyond 100 years. And also the technique was relatively new. People didn't understand it.
His technique is to dissect the whale's eye and remove the orbital bone, a tiny deposit layered inside like an onion. Nothing can be contaminated and must remain frozen. A unique amino acid is deposited here, which begins to decay as soon as it's formed. As new layers are added, like the growth rings of a tree, the difference between old and new layers can be measured, confirming the age. All mammals have this amino acid, and its rate of decay is constant. This is Bada's discovery.
So that looks like a good run, too.
You see the peaks coming out on the computer. One of those peaks is the left-handed form of the amino acid, and the other is the right-handed form. So we can use the peak size to determine the relative amounts of right to left-handed amino acid. And then we have an equation that we plug those results into, and that equation has been calibrated based on known age humans, known age whales, known age all kinds of different mammals. And we plug the ratios in there, and boom, out comes the age estimate. And as you saw, the one we analyzed today came out to be about 175 years old.
Bigger and wiser it gets. The oldest whale yet measured by Jeff Bada was a venerable and conservative 211 years, and even this one physically did not appear old. So far, we've only been able to measure the age of dead whales. Now there's a new question. How old can they get? With time running out and the flow edge off Igloolik slowly breaking up, Larry Duick has only a few chances left to use his last satellite tag. The ice is still very dangerous, but he's found it easier and quieter to approach the bowheads on foot. Although the bowhead has become the most studied whale species on Earth, researchers still don't know where this bowhead will go when it leaves the Fox Basin. Perhaps Duick's satellite tags will provide an answer. And if they do, it may tell the Inuit what they don't want to know. One day, they hope to be the hunters again. But until then, they will savor their moment with the bowhead.
This is the guy that took me to the last two holes I was chasing forward at and getting me all sweaty.
That's for sure.
I think one of my dreams did actually come true. My childhood dream was to be right there with the whale and be alongside the whale, a matter of 2 feet away from it. And being with the researchers and the scientists actually tagging the bowheads, a lot of my grandfather's stories start coming back as we were right on top of the whale. Actually being able to be with the animal and sort of feeling its breath, the breath coming into your face. Being there is a thrill that I've always wanted to feel.
For the researchers, it's been a summer of success and failure. In the beginning, their radio tags functioned perfectly, yet within days, all 5 fell silent and were lost. Next year, they'll be back to try again. In Alaska, the western bowhead population also continues its timeless migration. Here, ancient traditions have not been severed, and local knowledge remains strong.
In terms of Inupiat science and knowledge of whale behavior, migratory behavior, and the behavior of the sea ice and sea ice safety, I think Western science is still catching up, and I mean that quite honestly, that we're still, they're sitting on a couple thousand years of accumulated knowledge, and we're just coming in now.
In the past, Inupiat whaling captains had insisted that the bowhead population was greater than biologists estimated. In recent years, acoustic monitoring proved their point, doubling the tally and protecting the hunt.
When that whale comes right under your boat and just sits there, and you strike it, it has given itself to you. The spirit of the whale returns to the sea and is reborn. Based on our legends, whales live 2 lifetimes of man.
And so it appears that the Inupiat have known for centuries what science has only just confirmed. Without a gift from Inupiat whalers, Craig George would never have discovered one of the great natural mysteries of our time. George continues his research into bowhead longevity in a unique partnership with the Inupiat, sharing their knowledge and their whale.
The things about sharing the muktak and all that meat, and that's how we were taught. It's better to give, and it's better to share, or gives you a chance to give something to a community, and that's how this community has thrived for many years.
You gotta be a man, young man.
From the current population of 10,000 whales, the Inupiat harvest only 40 each year, making sure that the old ones are left to their immortal ways. And although we now know how old they can grow, we still don't know how old they really are.